I read 13 and a half books in the month of January, so let's talk about it. In no particular order, let's start off with Icebreaker. So I really, really loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. I made a whole video about it. It's like if you like spicy books, then this is the spicy book for you. Just gotta say, the Uber scene. But yeah, this is great. It's like a little romance. They're kind of like enemies at first. There's like that misunderstanding, and then like they date, and like it kind of follows through their relationship, which I think makes it stand out among other like romancy books, because it usually like they get together, then some misunderstanding happens, and then they solve it. But this one didn't really do that. It actually just like, there were misunderstandings, but it followed, like, they got together pretty early in this book, and it kind of followed like their journey together as a couple, and like followed them for a while. And so this one was really, really great, and the romance was so good, and the spice was so good. I ended up reading Catcher in the Rye for the first time ever. I know a lot of people, this is kind of like required in your school. My school curriculum did not require this book, so I've never got around to reading it, and part of my 2024 reading goals is reading a bunch of classic books that I never read in school, or just never end up gotten around like to reading, that just kind of exist in the world. So I did The Catcher in the Rye, and this book was really interesting to me. I think I would give it like a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And what was interesting about it, and I actually liked it more when I finished it, because when I started reading, I'm like, what is the plot of this book? Like, where is this going? And like, what is happening? However, what captivated me, despite my confusion, is how well this author, J.D. Salinger, makes it sound like it's actually like a teenage boy who's writing this book, but like in a good way. And I was also pleasantly surprised with like the mental health theme. Like, that's pretty much like weaved throughout the whole thing, and like loneliness and the loss of innocence and like growing up. So I understand why this is a classic, and I really liked that kind of interpretable ending. I personally think that it was a sign of positivity towards the end. It wasn't like him getting worse or anything. I think that it was a really hopeful ending, and so I had fun reading this book. I don't think about it like too often, but it was pretty good. My beloved Emily Wilde series. This one I gave 5 stars and has a whole video about it. And what I loved about this book is how whimsical it is. The folklore of this entire series, like, it really is true when the reviews say the series feels like a big warm hug. It's so nice, it's so fun. All the characters are so great, and it doesn't take place in like a normal setting, I would say, because like, what I mean by that is a lot of books, movies, TV shows takes place in like North America. This is more kind of like icy Nordic kind of vibes, like throughout the 2 books so far that are out. And so that's been like, it's really nice, it's really refreshing, and it's really fun, and there's fairies, and there's magic, and there's folklore, and I just love this series so much. I am waiting for the next book, and I don't know when it's gonna come out, but I'm really looking forward to it. Like, this is one of those books where the second book is on par with the first book, and that's like a really great accomplishment, and I love it so much. I could talk about this book forever. Speaking of the classics, I finally read Bram Stoker's Dracula. First, let's talk about the beautiful cover that I got. Gorgeous. And it came with this like little bookmark. Like, this is like the leather bound, beautiful, just beautiful. I gave this book about 4 stars, and that's because I really loved themes throughout this book, really understanding like where the popularity came from. However, there were times where I was like scratching my head, like, what does that say? Like, what are they trying to say? Because it's like an older book, it occasionally does have that really hard to understand, like old-timey writing where you have to like reread it a couple times to be like, what was that about? Like, what was that talking about? Like, who? What? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Or what does that mean? Like, what are these words they're using? So it was definitely like a little bit challenging to read, similar to like The Count of Monte Cristo would be, because it has like that old-timey language. So I had to put it down in terms of stars, because there were a lot of times where I was like really struggling to get through it because it was hard to understand it, if that makes sense. And it also has one of my least favorite things, and I first discovered it when I was reading Mark Twain when I was in high school, and it's when they write out accents in the books, And so it's just like written in a very strange manner with like a lot of different apostrophes and stuff like throughout, or like words that are like half words. And so it's really hard, I find, to try and read that because I'm like, what are they saying? Like, I've never enjoyed that type of writing. Like, I just don't like when they write the accents in there. Like, I get it from like a creative standpoint, but I just don't like it. However, other than the complication of reading, which is fine, like Shakespeare is hard to read, but the stories are great. The story itself was so good. I really, really loved that it was written in like diary entries. I thought that that was really cool, and you could really see like the perspectives of different characters, and I really loved, again, this is an old-timey book, but like the women were like the main characters. They were the smart, empowering, helpful characters who really, like, without them, Dracula would have killed everybody. Which, I love Dracula's character. I wish that we could have seen more of him, but like I thought that that was really cool, the way that he always had like the kind of mysterious vibe to him, and like really just everything about him. I'm definitely a Dracula fan. It really annoys me that in the movies that they would make Mina secretly in love with Dracula, because that was not the case at all. Like, Mina and Jonathan loved each other, continue to love each other, and she never had a thing with Dracula. Like, she hated Dracula, she helped kill Dracula, so like it really annoyed me that they're like, oh, let's put a secret love in here. But it's like, that's not the case, and that kind of defeats part of the story. Like, she was, in a way, like, she was immune to his charm. Like, she didn't like him, she didn't want him to be there, she hated what he did to Jonathan. Like, I have a lot of feelings about this. This book, I had so much fun reading this book, and I was like, oh my goodness, what's gonna happen next? Because I didn't know. Like, it is different than the movies, of course, like, and it's so much fun. So I like this one a lot. Next up, I have these two books that are part of the same series, so that's why I'm kind of showing them together, which is The Prophecy and The Resurrection by S.V. Filice, I believe is how you pronounce her name. And so these were actually gifted to me as a Christmas gift, and they're from a local author in a different town that I visit sometimes. And so they were given to me as a gift to kind of like support a local author in the area, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm super into that. Like, I love that. And so I did enjoy these books. I would probably give these two books and like the entire series probably 3 stars in total. And that's because there were times where I was a little bit confused about like what was happening, or it was a little bit slow, but because the author has so much potential and definitely knows like what she wants to be doing, I think that that kind of earns it a little bit more respect in my books, because I did enjoy the books. If I didn't like them, obviously I wouldn't read them. They're very like early days. Like, this is the author's first trilogy, and I had fun reading it. Like, I was like, oh, like, this is a really unique kind of idea. Like, it was really fresh. You didn't really see anything like that, really. And they're really short too, so I had a lot of fun, and I felt really, it was really great to be able to like support a local author, and it honestly inspired me a lot, because I'm like, oh, I gotta get my books published. But these ones were fun. They were basically about this girl and her sister and her boyfriend, and they end up kind of discovering that in these bloodlines that people have, like, they can be related to like angels and stuff, and they can get overwhelmed with this, and so if they have too much darkness in them, they can turn into demons, that kind of thing. And so they end up going to like this school that kind of teaches them these different affinities, and there's like a bunch of different ones, and it's like some of them is about like even believing in like supernatural kind of things, and so dependent on where you're lacking, you're kind of put into a different school. So she's actually separated from her sister and her boyfriend because they all have different areas of improvement they need to do. And so each of these schools is kind of like focused on helping them improve that. I really liked the romance of this book. I love the, ooh, like, will they, won't they kind of thing. I found Jeremy to be a useless character. I don't know why, like, he just didn't need to be there. I think the story would have been fine without him. But I really liked like the sister relationship and like the concept of it. So I wouldn't say that they're the best books that you'll ever read in your life. However, I think that they have a lot of potential and that they're pretty fun to read. And again, it's like an author's debut. So I'm excited to see more of what this author will continue to produce, because once you finally start getting books out there, there's so much more that you're gonna start to like get it all out there. So I'm really happy that I read these. Speaking of books that I'm really happy that I read, The Letters of Enchantment duology has me in a chokehold. Now, I made 2 videos about this, one about Divine Rivals and one about Ruthless Vows. And oh my goodness, these are both 5-star reads. Rebecca Ross is a visionary. I absolutely cannot get over, it's been days since I finished Ruthless Vows, and I still cannot stop thinking about it. I am obsessed with this so much. Like Emily Wilde and Letters of Enchantment, these are my two favorite reads of this month. And what's really great about the Letters of Enchantment is that it takes a really fresh perspective on like a war story. So they're not actually fighting in the war, they're the journalists who are reporting on this war against like a god and a goddess. And so I thought it was a really unique kind of perspective because they aren't actually like in the thick of it. Like they're writing each other like letters as well. Like they don't know, like at some point, like they don't really know who they're talking to, and they have like these magical letters and they're talking to each other and they're building a relationship, but they're actually rivals in real life. And like it's just so good. I could talk about this forever, like with Emily Wilde. Like I am obsessed with that kind of story, and it was so well done, so well written, all the characters were amazing, and my heart still hurts. And you know that if your heart still hurts after finishing a book or a series of books, then you know it's gonna have a lasting impact. So those were 5-star reads for sure. One of the other classic books that I read was William Golden's Lord of the Flies. Lord of the Flies was really disturbing, but in like a really good way. I had no idea really like what to expect going into it. I was scared that there was like cannibalism or something, but that's actually apparently like a Mandela effect. Like a lot of people thought there was, but then there actually wasn't. Like, yeah, but it was good because it really focuses on like the themes of like innocence and survival and like what defines humanity. Like where's the line when it comes to being more like a savage? Like where does that come from? And like what happens when you're like a young kid and you're kind of left to your own devices without like parental support or really like leaders to kind of help guide you, and how do you take up those reins and guide other people? So I really loved that one. The message of Lord of the Flies, the way I was on the constant, like I was always on the edge of my seat and I didn't know what was going to happen next. So that one was another 5-star read, and my all-time favorite classic that I've read so far. Now this one might surprise you, but it was $100 Million Leads by Alex Hormozi that I read this month as well. And why I say that's surprising is because a lot of the videos that I make are very fiction, fantasy kind of focused, and so it's like, oh, like what is this book doing here? It feels like it's kind of like an odd one out, eh? But I actually, like, when I'm not making videos or writing my stories and all that, I'm actually a content marketer in the professional world, and so this is one of the books that like me and the rest of like people in my company read. So we kind of have like this read-in, kind of like a book club that we do every quarter, and so this is the one, and for some reason it's like a really weird shape. Like I don't know, like it's just like, it's weird to me that this is like the size and the shape. It's like a textbook. Yeah, I loved $100 Million Leads. Honestly, not in the same way as like a fantasy rating, but from a personal development rating, this is a 5-star read for sure. Like it was so good. Like if you're in the world of marketing, if you're in the world of sales, if you're really doing anything like that, this book was so good. Like, to be honest, I didn't like the first section of it because it felt really too salesy for me, but there's so many great like nuggets in this book that it's one of the ones that I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to refer back to this like for my own day-to-day job. And it's really great because like I do content marketing, so there's some really great sections about like headlines and copywriting tips and things to test out, and like also just a perspective of like what my other team members do like in sales or in performance or anything like that. And it was really easy to read that book as well, and there was lots of nice pictures in it. I'll show you one. You can kind of see right here, like there's some pictures in here to make it easier. You can also kind of see like all the areas that I've kind of bookmarked, dog-eared. I'm a dog-earer when it comes to books that I'm going to refer to. Yeah, so you can kind of see that. So I found this book really valuable. Now, it's more like I read 13 and a half books because I didn't finish this one. I did not like The Atlas 6. I really did not like this book. I read half of it and then I dropped it because it just was not good. And it makes me feel bad because I hate not liking books. Like even if I don't like a book, most of the time I will finish it, but if I really don't like a book, I'll not finish it. And so I think my record of books dropped is only like 2 or 3, definitely 2 within the past like 2 years, because last year I dropped a book and then this year I dropped a book. But I did not like it. Like the writing was not very good in my opinion. The characters weren't good. There was nothing enjoyable about it. There was no plot, and I feel bad saying that, but big fat 0 for that book, and I do not recommend it. Another book that I read this month was Avery Reed's A Study in Drowning. Now this was recommended to me by my sister, and I think I broke her heart a little bit because I did not give this a super high rating. I think I said it was a 3.5. That sounds about right. I think this book was about a 3.5 because it wasn't bad, but it wasn't good. Like, I don't think I would recommend anybody to read this book, but like, I didn't hate reading it, you know? Like, it was just, I'm just indifferent about it. The concept of it was really cool though. And I liked the main character. I think they did a good job with her, but I think that it was lacking a lot of like other characters, and like nothing was really fleshed out entirely, and there wasn't a sense of urgency in that book. But it was essentially about like an architecture student and a literature student, and they're kind of like rivals at the beginning, and they end up at like this famous author's estate after he's like passed away, and she was kind of like recruited in a way to help redesign that building. And then the literature student was there to kind of like find some stuff to write like a thesis about. And so it was a really interesting like idea, but I didn't think that the execution was that strong. And so that's why I gave it a 3.5. Another classic, I read To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I'm happy that I read that book, but it's probably not a book that I would read again. I think that the message in it made sense, and there were definitely times, and I think a lot of people are aware, that it's a bit of a hard read in terms of the language that's used in that book. But I really liked the realistic ending that it had. Like, I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't read it, because like me, like, I never read the book. I had no idea like what it was even about or what was going to happen. The events that happened, like, I think that the trial is where it really caught my attention. And then when I was reading more, I was like, oh wow, like I found the book really well written. Even if it was a hard read, I think it was an important message, and it's followed a lot about like racism and like the eyes of a child. So like, it's from the eyes of a child who starts off when she's 6 years old. And I think that that was a really clever move on the author's part, because like, you're seeing it like the innocence of a child who doesn't entirely understand like what's happening, but is smart enough to understand, if that makes sense. But she sees it in her own kind of perspective. And I think that's why the book works well, because like a 6-year-old trying to understand racism and like what was going on, and just like, you see other things as well from her perspective where you're like, yeah, like she's like a kid, like when there was a dog that died, and she didn't really know, at least from my understanding, that was blood coming out of it. She was just like, oh, like the dog's wet. So like, there are things like that where it's really just like the innocence of a child in a difficult situation. And yeah, I think it was well done. And I liked towards the end as well about Boo Radley, and how it kind of is like, people think that he was like this really mean, scary person, but then you actually like understand him. And again, like the representation of like Boo Radley, I think was really good, because you can tell like when you actually see him, like he is neurodivergent. And I think that that's really great, because this is like an older book, I'm pretty sure. Like, I think it was 1960s that it came out. So yeah, I gave this book a 4.5 stars as well. I didn't want to give it 5 stars because the beginning I found was a little bit boring, but I really respect the way it was handled. Although I could do without the certain language that was used, and I think we can all kind of agree that that language is not necessary. And last but not least, we have Bonnie Garmus's Lessons in Chemistry. Lessons in Chemistry was a 4.5 star read. I really enjoyed it. It's one I would recommend if you're looking for like a fresh, kind of funny palate cleanser kind of book. Like, it doesn't take itself super seriously, but it also does in a way. Like, it's funny. I laughed more than a couple times reading this book. The selling point for it, in my opinion, is that you get the perspective of the dog 630 in some of the chapters, and so it's really cool because you see the perspective of a dog, you see a perspective of like Elizabeth, who's like the main character, you see the perspective of her young daughter, and like all of that. And I think that it was so fun. It was just a fun read. So if you're like kind of sad, kind of down, Lessons in Chemistry will cheer you up, I'm pretty sure. And it also has really great like feminist themes in there. It's like empowers you to challenge the status quo. Like, I kind of compare it to the Barbie movie, except with science involved. Yeah, I had a lot of fun reading that book, and I would definitely recommend it. Not just for women, but also for men. Men, you should read it as well, please. So yeah, that concludes all of the books that I read in the month of January 2024. got some good reads in there, got some okay reads, got some, unfortunately, a bad read. So here's to the next month of February. I'm currently reading Sarah J. Maas's House of Flame and Shadow. It is a gigantic book though, so I don't expect a video like in the usual pace for that one because it's like a big book, and that's gonna take me about a week or so to read that then. So yeah, thanks so much for watching. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell notification. That way you get notified anytime a new video comes out. As you can tell, I love books. I love talking about books. I read a variety of books as well, so if you're into that, don't forget to hit subscribe, and if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!